All right, hello. Today is Monday, December 28th, 2020. I'm Jeremiah Ellis, recording on behalf of the African American Interpretive Center of Minnesota, recording over the phone. Miss Carroll, thank you for sharing your story with us.
Absolutely.
Will you please state and spell your name for the record?
Jodie Carroll, Jodie Carroll.
Thank you. And will you tell us when and where were you born?
I was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
All right. And what can you tell us about your parents?
My mother is an immigrant from Poland and Austria. Her parents were from. And they came over after the war to the United States. And my father was the son of sharecroppers down in Georgia. And he has since passed. He passed in 2002. So he's been gone for a while now.
And what can you tell us about their parents?
Well, I know my mother's mother passed when she was 19 years old, I believe. And her father, who I remember, he had a very thick Polish accent. He remarried and moved over to Wisconsin. And he owned a farm in Wisconsin with his new wife and had some children, another family of children. And
what were your interactions like with him?
Well, I think they were good. My grandfather kind of understood what I dealt with as we moved and different places that we lived in. And I think he had a heart for me, and understanding. And, he would spend time with me and talk with me when he'd come to visit, or when we would go over to visit him. It wasn't too often. We didn't spend a whole lot of time. But he passed shortly after my father did, actually, in 2002 as well. They both were named John.
And how about your father's parents? What do you know about them?
My father's father, I never met. And his mother, I only had an opportunity to meet and see maybe 2 or 3 times before she passed. So I didn't have very much interaction with my grandparents.
And so how did you get from Minneapolis, where you were born, to greater Minnesota?
Okay, so we owned small stores. My parents were entrepreneurs, and they had owned gas stations. I believe he owned the very first black-owned gas station on 38th and, I think, Park Avenue over South Minneapolis. And that's when I was an infant, so I was really young then. And shortly after I was born, we moved to Boston, Massachusetts. And we ended up owning a chain of stores out there. I think we had 5 in total. At one time, Carroll's food chain, it was called. And then from Boston, we ended up down south, which was first, I believe, Columbus, Georgia, was the first place we lived. My father's sisters lived there. And then from there, we moved to Seal, Alabama, where we did pulpwooding, it's called. And that's where you cut down the trees to make paper. And then from there, we went back to Boston for a little while. They had bought a couple properties, and we actually lived in them while they renovated a couple of them, and they had an apartment building as well, and the stores, and I think we had to tie up some loose ends there, and then we ended up moving back to Minnesota. I think my mom wanted to come home. She had a sister here, and her father, of course, was close by in Wisconsin. And so from there, we moved back to Minneapolis, and we owned a store off of Minnehaha Avenue. And I don't think that one did so well, so we ended up moving to 12th and Hennepin. And from there, I think I was in about fourth grade at that point, and attended Jefferson Elementary School in South Minneapolis. And from there, I believe a developer bought out the building that we were in on 12th and Hennepin. And with that, my dad had some friends in Anoka, Minnesota that they had like a hog farm. And so I guess that was the next venture. And he found the farm that we moved to. And so once we were bought out in Minneapolis, we ended up moving up to Hillman, Minnesota. And so I was about 11 years old when we moved there. I was going into sixth grade.
And tell me about Hillman. What's it like?
Hillman was a very small farming community, and wow, there were no other people of color in Hillman at the time, other than I think the population was 53 people, so we would have made it 56 when we got there. There was in the town, there was a general store, a bar, and I believe a post office. And that was it for the town. If you blinked, you'd miss it. And I went to school in the neighboring town of Oneemia, Minnesota. So we were about 7 miles out towards Hillman from Oneemia is where our property was.
And what do you think attracted your parents to that area?
So like I had mentioned, my father had a friend that owned a farm in Anoka, Minnesota, and my grandfather as well had a farm in Wisconsin. So I believe in their conversations, and my dad being an entrepreneur and then coming from the South where he had farmed and done that kind of work, felt that might be the next best venture, I guess. And so I believe he got purchased a few animals from the friend in Anoka, and that's how we kind of got started. And then being the new people, I believe a couple of other farmers came by, or my dad, actually we had the remainder of the store. We moved up to Oneemia and opened up a small store. It didn't do very well at all. And so he just kind of sold off the rest of that merchandise that we had there, and then just focused solely on farming from that point.
And what kind of farming was it?
So in the beginning, it was pigs, hogs. So you would raise the pigs. We'd sell feeder pigs, and they were, I think it was 40 pounds. If you got above 40 pounds, you weren't able to sell them. And so we would have to I'll never forget, clip the tails, clip the eye teeth, they were called, which would have turned into tusks. and also neuter the males, because something about when they would get older would affect the meat in some kind of a way. And also, clip the tails as well, because they chew tails. It's kind of morbid sounding, but that was just part of the farming.
And how much of that was your responsibility?
The farming itself, the interaction with the animals.
Yeah, what were your interactions like with them?
Oh, I was 100% in there. I had my chores I had to do. I had to feed them. I had to help when it was time, when we had a new litter. If it was winter time, you make sure that they had heat lamps and hay. Make sure that the hay was clean in the area where they slept, and feeding and watering. In the wintertime, you had to make sure that the babies had heat lamps, and make sure that we had a part in the pen that they would be in that the babies could go under the heat lamp, because it was very common for the sow to roll over the babies, and that's lots of money if that would happen. So that was my responsibility to make sure that, it was all of our responsibility, but these were my chores as well. I was the only child, so I was right out there in the midst of it, and you'd have to make sure that they had water. In the winter, of course, it would freeze, so you'd have to break the ice and make sure and water them a few times a day before the water would, if it would freeze, they wouldn't get any water or anything. So I was definitely hands-on, involved in everything.
And who helped you and your father and your family get settled in the Hillman area?
I believe they just had a realtor with Century 21 at the time, and he was looking for a property, and they helped us find the property, and I believe my father's friend, kind of gave him a heads up on how and where to go buy farming equipment and what was needed to run the operation. And it just kind of went from there. No one really, other than that kind of help, we were on our own.
You had mentioned that you went to school in the Oneemia district. What was it like for you to be in that school district?
It was rough. I was one of two black children in the school at that time, and the one girl actually was born and raised up there, and so I think she was very quiet and timid, shy type of girl. She was a grade under me, but I came from a different place than there, so I was an outsider. I remember the Native Americans, the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe children would come to our school at that time. They had another school they could go to on the reservation called Nayashing, and a lot of them would come to Oneemia High School, and I didn't know there was a contention between the natives and the white people up there. And when I came, due to my complexion and my hair, I wore braids, long braids all the time. I believe the Native Americans thought I was Native, and so they kind of welcomed me into their group on the first day of orientation. And then once they found out that I wasn't Native American, I think we all have, I know I have Native American in me, but I wasn't from their tribe or any neighboring tribe or anything. And my father was a black man, so they no longer wanted anything to do with me. And of course, the white children were, there was contention between the Native Americans and then, well, I'm black, so there was really contention for me. So there was a lot of name calling and taunting and teasing and things like that.
What names were used, if you don't mind sharing?
Oh, nigger was the number one. Up there, yeah. And I can't remember verbatim the things that they would say, but, you know, pertaining to me being black and, oh gosh, it was so long ago. Yeah, I can't remember.
Okay.
All of the, you know, the exact things that were said, but it all pertained to me being black and, coming from the ghetto, and, you know, whatever they saw on TV is what was portrayed on TV is what they, believed me and my family to be like. So yeah, a lot of ignorance for sure.
And so, what were your interactions like with the couple of other black students?
Good. We actually got to know, the girl I was speaking of, the one in the grade younger than me. We went over, or their family came, to welcome us to the community, I believe. So we would go over to their home, and I remember they were Seventh-day Adventists, and so, their church, I think, was from sundown on Saturday, their Sabbath rather. And we were invited to come over, during those times with them. And that was different for me, because I hadn't really been brought up in the church per se. And so I thought that was, you know, it was a little different, and, their lifestyle was a little different from ours. I don't think they did any farming. But they were very welcoming, and they became friends of ours that we could go visit with. Yeah. She was the only other child that I remember up there, though.
And how did your parents respond to your interactions at the school?
Well, we had lived in different areas, like in Georgia and Boston, and I always had a tough time wherever we went, being biracial. I was called all kinds of names and taunted a lot. So my parents would always tell me to stick up for myself, and you know, my mom would come up to the school if necessary. If I came home and it had been a really rough day or something like that, she would come up to the school and, you know, let them know that wasn't acceptable. But I, for the most part, was on my own to deal with the situations. And so there was fighting involved, and I stuck up for myself. I was taught to stick up for myself. And so that's how I handled it when I wasn't able to talk through things with someone.
And so you mentioned you've been in schools in different areas. How was the Oneemia experience different than the other district that you were a part of?
So being in the city in Minneapolis, of course, you've got more variety of people. So it's definitely going to be different. The mindset is completely different. However, being down in Seal, Alabama, or Columbus, Georgia, where it's very racist, I was there. I was, you know, a zebra or picked on and I remember in Boston as well, picked on and taunted a lot for being biracial. And so I kind of got it from every which way in that era. This was in the 70s and 80s. So it wasn't very well accepted. when you moved outside of city limits, being the different person.
And so in Hillman and the Oneemia area, how did you socialize?
I got really good at deciphering who was genuine and who people who liked me and that I could build a relationship with, who were open to it. And so I did make some really great friends, but there were always those who did not welcome me, and their parents didn't welcome me or want me around. I remember there was a group of us that kind of hung together from Hillman. So Hillman was, like I said, about 15 miles away from Oneemia, but because they were neighboring cities and Oneemia had the school, we would bus in. And so Hillman kids were more of farmers, and Oneemia kids there were some farming families as well, but it was more city. But again, I think Oneemia had 500 people maybe. So not big city. There was a grocery store and a couple of cafes and a drugstore and things like that. So I just kind of got in where I fit in with people. It made me very good at deciphering people's intentions, I guess I'll say.
So, how else did you engage in the Hillman community? Business, churches, or community groups?
So for myself, my parents didn't really socialize. We didn't have a church up there that we went to. We had the Newsoms, who were our neighbors, and there was a father and son, the Johnsons, who lived up there, that my father and mother would associate with. But as far as the white families, they never really interacted with my parents. There were a couple of farmers, one, for instance, who he also raised pigs. And so, the two farmers that my father befriended raised pigs and also cows. One of the farmers did. And I, from working, had earned myself like 2 feeder pigs. So I took my 2 feeder pigs and I traded for a horse with the neighboring farmers. So that's how I got myself a horse. And I broke her all by myself. I think I was probably 12 at that time, and she was a little over, close to 2 years at that time. So she was a little young, but so was I. And so there was that experience. I spent a lot of time alone, but I also found that I was very athletic. And so I played every sport there was that they had there. And so that's how I socialized. I played volleyball, and basketball was my game, and ran track, and so that's how that's how I interacted with the people, was through sports, I'd have to say, in school, the friends that I had in school. No one was going to invite us over to their homes or anything like that.
And so what were the sporting games or events? How was that for you?
So I grew a thick skin, I guess, and once people got to know me, I was more accepted. It was tough in the beginning, like anything, I'd say, but that was a little extreme. And so once people got to know me, though, and know who I was and what I was going to deal with and what I wasn't going to deal with, it became a little easier, and I was pretty good at sports, so that helped me a lot in getting along. Yeah. Did I answer that question completely?
Yeah, you did. Yes.
Okay.
And I'm also kind of wondering, so, I imagine you traveled to other schools to compete, and just, where would you go to compete, and what was that experience like?
So our competing cities were like Ogilvie, Minnesota, Rush City, Minnesota. We had tournaments in Royalton and Aiken and Isle, Minnesota was our main competitor. They were the closest to us. And, other surrounding small town communities. And I really didn't, every now and again, someone would shout out the N-word or there would be some contention on the court, but I'd gotten pretty well at handling myself. So, I guess I didn't, trying to recall if I know I had issues, because my senior year, I remember, so like I said, if I couldn't handle things with my words or if someone put their hands on me or something like that, then it would turn into a fight. And so I remember I had to sign a contract my senior year that I wouldn't get into any fights in order to play sports. Because I think I got to a point to where I became bitter and I was just sick and tired of being teased or picked on or called names or what have you. So, I remember that stands out to me, that in traveling to other cities was in that contract. I wonder if I have that thing somewhere. But I know we had to have my school counselor, our athletic director, and, I forgot his title. Our district-wide, principal, I believe, were all in that meeting along with my coaches, and I had to sign paperwork, and I didn't think that was fair because I wasn't the one that was causing the problem.
Why do you think that was their requirement for you?
I guess I don't know. If I wanted to play, I had to agree to that. So in hindsight, are they asking me to agree to being called names or being talked down to or, whatever was happening? I'm not really sure. I was just a kid. So, I think they were looking at it as I would fight, but they did, are you not understanding? They didn't take into consideration the things that I was dealing with, or they felt maybe I should have dealt with it in a different way. And by that time, I'd grown tired of turning the other cheek or putting up with it. It was very frustrating. No one else had to do anything like that. I know that.
And how did your father respond?
He wasn't, I don't even know if I told my dad about it, to tell you the truth. I'm not even quite sure I told him about it because he had his own issues with the police up in that area. There was an incident going on. For him, I know my mother and him dealt with their own things when I was at school, frequenting the community stores if they had to. And I'm kind of going off topic, but my mother and father both had some issues with racism up there. And so, yeah, I'm not even sure I told them at that time.
Well, what were your father's interactions like in the community?
Well, like I said, we only had a couple of other farmers that we really socialized with, and the other black families with the young girl, and then there was one with the older son and the dad that lived up there together. And but there was an instance I remember where we had a small operation farm where our barn, was just lit regularly, meeting regular light bulbs. There was no fluorescent lighting or anything like that would take a whole lot of electricity. And we later on had gotten dairy cows. And so, you would think that would take a lot of energy, but it really didn't, because we had the old equipment. We used pump cans. And so you would strap it onto the cow and then carry it into the milk tank and dump it, whereas larger operations or people with more money could have a pipeline, they called it, and you would just put the suction on the cow's teeth and it would go directly into the tank through the pipeline. Well, we didn't have that type of an operation, so it was the energy that was being used was really not anything. And so we had a big beef cattle operation across the highway from us, across Highway 27. And every month our bill was about $200, and it shouldn't have been any more than $40 with our house and our barn usage. And that was a lot of money back then. You didn't make very much money farming, and especially on the level that we were doing it. We were just putting food on our table at that point. And so we found out, or my father found out, that the operation across the street had been taking, I believe they had dairy cows too, but they had huge barns and pole barns and equipment and everything. And so our bill was over $200 a month. We couldn't afford it. And my dad got really upset. And so a guy out back then would have to come and climb up the electric pole, which stood in our yard, and manually disconnect our electricity. And so my dad held a shotgun on the guy and told him, get off his property. And then he came back with the police. And so they ended up going ahead and turning our electricity off. And so we went that entire summer without electricity. So we would have to take buckets with ropes, 5-gallon, something people could understand, like 5-gallon Menards buckets or, Home Depot buckets. And you tie a rope onto the handle and drop it down into the well, and then you would pull it up for your water. And so I remember we had a propane tank out in our yard, and so we would heat water to take baths with, and we would we used candles for lighting. And so that was like an entire summer of that, because they turned off our electricity because that farm was leaching energy from our pole some kind of a way. I don't know whether wires got crossed or whatnot, but I mean, that was just ridiculous. And they went into the city. I want to say Little Falls was the closest city with courts in a place where they could, you know, try to look into it more and find out what had happened and whatnot. And it come to find out that wires were crossed or something wasn't right, and they were in the wrong. And so we just had to deal with it, you know, an entire summer without any electricity or running water. And then also I remember we were a part of the Pigford Black Farmers case, where they gave loans to black farmers because there aren't very many at all, but they were on different terms and conditions, and I'm not quite sure if it was the cows or the terms weren't the same as what they were giving to the white farmers, and so someone filed a suit, and we I don't know if they contacted us, and we were in on that. And so we actually won that case. And that was towards the end of my time being up there. But, I mean, the type of work, my father had 4 heart attacks, I believe, and aorta valve replacement surgery when I think I was 13 years old. So he pretty much worked himself to death. He was the hardest working man I've ever known in my life. And I was his sidekick, so I was right there with him during all of this. And because we were black, we were treated differently and less than. And it took a toll, definitely, on our family and our livelihood. And during that time, because farming wasn't very lucrative, my mom got a job at a local cabinet making company, I believe. And someone there, she had issues as well because everyone knew that I was her daughter and that, you know, her husband was black. And so they'd pick on her and, you know, do certain things at the job to pick on her, like maybe put her, they made furniture, I believe it was. And so, you know, she'd have to carry things from different pallets and place them in certain places. It was a factory, kind of maybe like an assembly type deal. And I remember her final straw was one of the guys that called her a nigger lover. And she ended up filing a suit against them, and she won because other people had witnessed them doing things to her on the job that just, you know, weren't good. So.
And so wait, who did she sue? Was it the individual or was it the company?
You know, I think both. I think
Okay.
the company was trying to cover for him. And so they ended up having to, they were a part of it as well.
You had mentioned that your father was very hardworking. What do you think were his motivations for such hard work?
Myself and my mom. He told me the night before he had his aorta valve replacement, he called me out of my room to the kitchen table, and my mom was at work at that factory, at that cabinet making place. And I think he knew because he had quite a few heart attacks, like I said, 4 heart attacks before then, so he knew something wasn't right. And he brought me out and had a talk with me and told me that, you know, he told me he was proud of me and that the reason that we worked so hard, or he had been so hard on me at times, was because he wanted the best for me, and he always wanted me to be able to take care of myself and not have to depend on anyone. And yeah. And then the next morning, my mom called me. I guess by the time she got home, she would get off work about 2, 3 in the morning. And she called me from Minneapolis because when she got home, he must have needed her to take him down. Or she took him to the hospital in Oneemia. I can't remember. An ambulance brought him down to Hennepin County. And then he had his surgery. So it was, she and I had to take care of the farm while he was going through a surgery. And it didn't go well in the beginning. He was in a coma for about 30 days. And we went down. We would come visit him when we could, as much as we could, on weekends mainly, because we still had to take care of the pigs and animals in the farm. And I still to this day have a chipped tooth. He was on a dialysis machine because his kidneys were starting to break down after 30 days of coma. And just something about that blood and maybe just the stress. Looking back now at the time, I went to go to the end of the hall of the ICU. There was a room for families. And I remember, the last thing I remember is reaching for that door handle, and I guess I fainted and I hit the floor and woke up, and the doctor was kind of cradling my head off the floor and asking me if I was okay. And I felt the air go across my nerve on my tooth, so I had busted my tooth out. But, yeah, it was quite an experience, to say the least.
Wow.
Yeah, he killed himself trying to make a way for me and my mom, basically. And he was an uneducated man. He could barely write his name, but I think back that he did all of these things and raised me and taught me all the things that I know.
He sounds like a great man.
Yeah, he had his shortcomings too, but we all do the best that we can with what we got.
It sounds like he stayed in the area for quite a while.
Yeah, I left around when I left to go to college, Augsburg College. I left a little earlier than that, because times were so hard. I just really wanted to get away from there. And I had lived in the city before, so, I wanted to be back in the city. I didn't want to be up there anymore. Things had just gotten to be, it was so much to deal with all the time. And the isolation, because we didn't have community like the other people did up there. So I had left home pretty early, and my mom convinced me to come back to finish high school. But as soon as I graduated, I left, and my counselor, who was a heaven sent for me up there, really took me in and cared for me. And so he found, although scouts would come up from Augsburg College to see me play. They wanted me to play softball and volleyball and basketball for them. And so he found me a spot at Augsburg College. I was going to go into the military with my best friend, and I had taken the ASVAB and everything. And he talked me into going to Oxford College instead. So my dad and mom stayed up there for another, 8 years, I believe. And his health had really declined. He ended up getting, after the aorta valve surgery, he couldn't work the way he had before. And especially not without my help. So, they stayed up there kind of isolated for a lot of years, and then he got Parkinson's disease. And they would come down to the cities to go to the hospital, and I had a place down here. I did a year of college, and it just wasn't for me. I wasn't prepared for it, and so I had gotten a place and a job, and had my first daughter when I was 20, and they came down and would stay with me when you go to doctor's appointments. But we didn't have a whole lot of money, so the Parkinson's and the research, they had very little research done at that time, and so it took him out pretty quick. I'd say he got it around 99, and he was gone in 2000.
How would you characterize any changes for him in that community during his time there? Like, how would had his interactions changed with people or with community groups while he was there?
I don't think it did change for him. Like I said, they were isolated there. And they just, they would rather be alone than deal with the racism and those types of things. And for myself, it was rough because no one would date me because I was Black. And I remember, I kind of got off my train of thought, but I had a group of girlfriends from Hillman that I would hang with, and I remember one of my girlfriends had a birthday party, and she had a farm, and her brothers lived there, and they farmed dairy cattle as well, and so she wanted to have a sleepover, and the brothers and the dad didn't want me in their house. So they had a trailer on the property, and it was a pretty, an older trailer. No one was in it, but she felt so horrible, and she really liked me. We were all best friends, and so we all went out a day after school and fixed the trailer up as best we could so we could have our sleepover and I could come because the family didn't want me in their house. So, it kind of just depended on the people, but the majority of the people were very racist and not welcoming at all.
So was the entire sleepover party in the trailer, or did they make you stay in the trailer by yourself?
No, we all. My
okay.
friends thought that it wasn't right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and they tried to console me about it, and don't worry about it. We love you. You're our friend, and things like that. But
mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the type of thing that hurts you in your soul. Because I just couldn't understand why. I'm not a bad person. It just didn't make sense to me. They weren't even willing to meet me, to get to know me, and just judged me on the color of my skin. So that type of thing doesn't leave you. You always have that. Experience.
You mentioned a little bit about an income, sort of like you weren't necessarily the most wealthy farm family in the community. How much did income play in your interactions in the area?
Oh, a lot. Like I had mentioned, the kids in Oneemia were more like the city kids. And then, so back then it was like jabot was the big style, and Guess jeans and things like that were the more stylish clothing, which was the same in the cities. But the farming community in Hillman and outlying places, we didn't have money to get those kinds of things. So the city, there was also prejudice from city kids towards the country kids. And then there was cross discrimination between all of the white people, both country and city, and the Native Americans. So it was just flying every which way up there.
And so from that part of the state, how did you connect with Black culture or celebrate Black culture?
So we didn't, other than my father loved the blues. So when he sang or when he cooked, which he was a wonderful cook, he cooked soul food, and he cooked for an army. So we would eat off of it for a really long time. And he would sing the blues. So I'm a blues lover. And he would explain to me about blues legends and where the blues came from. And, as certain shows would come on TV, he would educate me on who these Black people were and how they impacted our culture and different points in history. And because I wasn't definitely getting it in school. We still aren't getting it in school. And he was my source. And coming from the deep South, like when we lived down in Columbus and Steele, Alabama, he would take me and my mother they had plantation tours. And so we would go on those plantation tours, and he would take us off the side from the tour guide, give him the tour, and take us back in the back where the slave quarters were and things like that, and give us, the true rendition of the way things were. And he was my source.
What are some of the ways he would explain history or teach about Black culture? Or what were you just got a couple of examples.
Well, he was bitter, and he was illiterate, so his teachings were real and guttural, actual things he experienced, lynchings when he was a boy. He didn't care for prejudiced white people and the Klan, and these were things that came up regularly in his conversation. But he believed there were good and bad people in all cultures. So, but things he had seen and gone through as a young man and all through his life in that era, not being able to drink out of a water fountain or, go to a restaurant or sit in a certain place on a bus. He didn't fare well with that idea, those ideals at all. So he had a hard way. He wasn't compliant when it came to things like that. So he would tell me the truth in his way, it wasn't like I was reading out of a book. Sometimes it was very visceral, the things he would say, and very real. He told me like it was.
And so in the Hillman region, were there any notable events or historic sort of things that happened?
Other than us being a part of that Pickford case, the only thing I can think of that happened was the year I graduated, Mille Lacs Casino was built. So the Native Americans kind of got a little bit of, I don't know if you want to call it justice, but they were finally allowed to have something, or I'm at a loss for the correct word for it. But they got their casino, and then there were laws about, it was really big about fishing on Mille Lacs Lake, and I believe netting or trapping a type of fish. You use a net to catch the fish, and spearing were all Native American cultural ways of fishing. And so I believe the lake was being overfished, commercialized, and they wanted that to stop. And so that I remember that being a big event happening. And the white people were really upset about that happening. But then when that casino came, all the white people, a lot of people I graduated with ended up going to work there.
And how did the casino impact your family?
My mom ended up working there for a while. Once my dad was sick and wasn't able to work anymore, she worked at the casino. So it gave, people who otherwise wouldn't have probably been able to stay, or just living really poor. It gave people means. As much as the white people hated the Native Americans, they, when that casino came, they sure did go get those jobs.
And you mentioned the Pickford case. How did that impact your family?
We got a settlement from that case, so that was very helpful in that time because, like I said, my father was sick, and so it was a little bit of redemption. Justice had been served for the wrongdoing, because I don't think anything ever came of us having to live an entire summer or more without electricity because of that farm across the street or across the highway. So many things had been done and gotten away with that. The fact that we actually won that was huge, and it was a huge financial impact for my family as well. We suffered a lot, but, although money isn't everything, that it really, it helped, and it was needed with him being so sick.
And for this next question, I think you've alluded to it already, but I just wanted to make sure I'm asking it clearly. How did living in the Oneemia area impact your ability to access employment opportunities?
Oh, there wasn't much there. Like, if you didn't, by the time I graduated, the casino was built. So, either you farmed or a lot of people drove to the city to work. or a lot of the people I graduated with ended up working at the casino. So there wasn't anything, available there. You'd have to drive to Little Falls or Brainerd or Malacca or somewhere. And if you're black, you're really going to have a hard time. I think my mom tried forever to get into the postal service, and it just never happened.
And from your experience in the Oneemia area, how has it changed since you first became acquainted with it to now?
Well, I think with time and everything, things are a little more lax, but I wouldn't think it's changed too much. I don't frequent up there anymore. I really don't have any reason to. My mom sold our farm years back, and so I don't really, go up there, but I've heard that drugs like meth and things like that have really taken its toll on the area. The casinos was still doing well, I believe, but that also has wreaked havoc on the reservation, all the drugs that came up there.
And how would you say you improved the Hillman area by living there?
Well, people got to know, they got to know me as far as their families and extended families would hear of me, and I was in the newspaper for the local paper for sports or by word of mouth, and I think I was a positive influence there because I was always doing something positive, and I was always there wasn't ever a negative interaction with meeting me, other than if, someone would come cross towards me, then we'd have an issue. But other than what people saw on TV, I actually had people say that they thought black people were like what they saw on TV shows. And, well, you're not like that, So I guess I opened some eyes in that aspect. I made some great friendships. I have a friend, we just bumped into each other in the last couple of years. We went to 6th grade and she left at the beginning of 10th grade, and we just bumped into each other again, and we're close friends again. And I made some really good close friends up there as well, lifelong friends. So despite not their families maybe not wanting me around at first, or there was one good friend of mine, her dad he called me his little nigger girl and thought that was okay. Things like that. So out of touch.
Wow.
Yeah.
How would you say your father improved the Hillman area by living there?
Well, they knew not to mess with him. They saw a man with his family working hard and just trying to live his life and have the same things that they had. And, he wasn't a criminal or a thug or whatever it was that they were seeing on TV. He was a man trying to raise a family just like they were, and take care of his family.
And how would you say his life was improved by living in the Hillman area?
I know living in the country has lasting benefits, just being in nature. That in itself is, health-wise, is a wonderful thing for a person. And clean, fresh air. Yeah, just the outdoor experience. I love nature myself, and it's stuck with me since those times, being a young girl, riding my horse through the woods and spending time outdoors. I love the outdoors. So I think for his health, it was better for him to be there. And he stayed busy. He always stayed busy, doing something, working on something. So I think it was peaceful.
And how would you say your life has been improved by having lived in Hillman?
Well, like I just mentioned, for my father, the nature. I definitely, I feel like I'm both. I'm a city girl and a country girl. I love nature, animals. I spend a lot of time outdoors. And the type of work that we did was so hard. The baling the hay, the picking the rocks, the animals, the responsibilities, the mending things, building things, fixing things. I know how to work on cars. I know how to run saws. I know how to, it's only made me a better, well-rounded person. And as of a couple of years ago, I became a firefighter. And what I learned on that farm directly correlates to my job. 1,000%. And I'm very comfortable at my job. I found my place because I'm so comfortable in that outdoor setting, using the equipment. And on the farm, you have to have a certain instinct being around animals, which can be very dangerous. And when I first moved up there in 6th grade, there was a boy, and so we ground our own feed for our animals and things like that, and there was a boy who got his arms pulled off. David Vernick was his name, and he had been one of the kids that called me nigger when I first got there. I'll never forget. And a few months into the 6th grade school year, he got his arms pulled off on a PTO shaft. So being on a farm, you had to be aware and vigilant all the time because it could be life or death for you, whether it being a piece of machinery or animal, accident, falling in a well. I mean, there was just so many things that you had to be aware of. So that's always been with me.
I want to ask a little bit about 2020 for you, but also wanted to give you the opportunity to say anything else or ask if I failed to ask you anything, or is there anything else you wanted to share about your time in the Hillman, Oneemia area that other folks should know?
I guess I would say those experiences that we went through, they were definitely on some extremely hard times, and we went through some extreme situations. But I also feel like Black people need to be involved with nature and roots in the country more than what we are, because there is a certain solace there. It's natural, and we miss out on a lot of things, and healing and all kinds of, growing our own food and just getting back to our roots. We missed out on that, and I think it's a lot to do with the fact that whites don't want us there, and try to keep us out. And so I would love that to change. I would love for us to get more in touch with those roots that we have and where we come from, and not look at it as a negative thing. As far as the land and nature goes, the people, we throughout history have had to learn to continue on no matter what they may say or think or feel. And I don't think that's ever going to change in my lifetime anyway. So I would say I would really urge Black people to not let other people stop them from experiencing our culture, our original culture, where we come from. We are people who grew our own food. We, took care of ourselves. We know how to live off the land, and that was just completely taken from us. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And so 2020 has been unprecedented. And so I'm wondering, what has been your response to the current health pandemic?
Well, I'm a first responder, so I'm seeing it, front and center. And I think everyone should follow the rule with the mask and the washing the hands, and but I don't let fear completely take over your world. We still have to continue on, and I'm out there every single day, and thank goodness I've not contracted it. I've been tested quite a few times now, but I also follow protocol and keep my mask on, and but my life hasn't stopped, and I think with everything that's happening, the way everything's getting shut down, that I hope we will be more appreciative of the things and the blessings that we had prior to COVID closing everything off, and the freedoms and things that we could do before. It's really sad how it's taken lives, and some people are just being really ignorant about the precautions. But in the same, I think, I don't think we should let it completely stop life. There's so many other things to do. You can take care of yourself. You can focus on other things in your world that may have been neglected before. I know, for me, I was in fitness and a trainer for years, and so I was looking for equipment and bicycles, and when COVID first hit, it was, spring summer, and every piece of equipment in every store and even Amazon was gone. So that is a positive thing, if that's what COVID has brought. And I think there's more of the positive that can be found. We just need to look for that and protect ourselves. Keep protecting yourself.
And what has been your response to recent renewed calls for racial justice?
I'm happy. I'm glad that it's happening. I'm not liking the way that it has to happen and the means by the way it's happening. It's terrible. It's tragedy that people are just losing their lives and people are turning the other way like nothing's going on. And then when people speak up and stand up for themselves, they're in the wrong. It's just absurd to me. But I am glad that people are waking up and saying what's happening, and I hope more people wake up and we can, live in a place where the people who want to keep things the way that they have been for all these years will be the minority. And the majority will be the people who will fight for what's right.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.